Good Sunday morning. My name is Jaden Jefferson, and welcome to this week's Community Focus. This morning, I am joined by Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, who is joining me after what has been a very busy few weeks for you with the Ohio primary election. So, thanks for joining me this morning.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Jaden.
So, would you first be able to give me an idea of what the turnout was for this primary, and if you had any expectations of what it would be?
Well, I tell you what, we always try to see as much turnout as we can. We work hard to promote election day as well as early voting and absentee Ohioans is an important part of my job because we know elections work best when the diverse voices of Ohioans can be heard. Now, starting out the early voting period, some low expectations. They said that this is going to be a really low turnout election. And so we were working hard to make sure that Ohioans knew. And last week of early voting, record numbers. So we actually primary and the 2014 primary. Now, primary elections are a different animal from presidential elections. You just unfortunately don't see the same kind of participation as you would in a presidential election year, for example, which tend to be the highest turnout years. But we saw a steady level of participation. We were well over 20%. I think it was 23%. We still have the trailing absentee ballots and overseas military ballots that will continue to come in for another couple of days. And so we'll have a final number when we do the official canvass here in another couple of weeks.
And it's obviously been a challenge for years to increase turnout for primaries because there's just not as much excitement and emphasis, even though these elections, you can argue, are just as important, even more important than those other elections. So what have been some of the ways your office has been working to get more voters out to the polls for those primary elections?
Yeah, Jaden, it's important to note that one of the biggest single determinants of participation is how excited people are about the candidates that are on the ballot. And so there tended to be a little bit higher turnout in this election on the Republican side, because I think Republicans were excited about the U.S. Senate race and the governor's race. And so that tended to drive some turnout. It's important to note that in Ohio, we make it really easy to vote. In fact, this is an area where we're a leader, and I'm very proud of this fact. Many states have nothing close to the voting we have. Many states don't allow people to vote absentee from the comfort of home as we do. And even when it comes to early or just normal voting hours, 30 p.m., that's longer than what many states have. Ohio has Saturday early voting. There are only something like 20 other states in the country that offer weekend early. There's only 5 other states that Sunday afternoon early voting. And this has become a great tradition in a lot of faith communities where people will organize events where people will go to church on Sunday morning and then maybe go to the polls on Sunday afternoon. So all of these are some of the convenient ways that Ohioans have for voting. So it's important that we continue to make sure that Ohioans know they can trust their elections. We've launched a website, voteohio.gov/secure, that goes through a lot of the different safeguards that are in place so people know when they cast their ballot that it's going to be honestly counted. For nations, people want to know that it's an honest election, and that drives voter participation. And then, as you mentioned, it's about getting the word out. It's about talking to journalists like yourself before the election. It's about doing a lot of social media account work. It's about making sure that we use every different mechanism that we have to spread the word. And by the way, there's going to be a second primary this year because of all of the lawsuits related to redistricting. There's a necessity now that there be a second primary. It's almost certainly going to be held on August 2nd. That date hasn't been finalized yet. That'll have to be set either by the federal court, but there will be a second primary. And so I hope Ohioans are already starting to think about that and maybe even signing up to be poll workers, which these are those great Ohioans, usually tens of thousands, staffing the polling locations. And the way to sign up to be a poll worker is at voteohio.gov. We're always working on that.
We will definitely get to talking about that second primary because I know it's definitely confusing when you have this election season and then you're told there's another primary happening. But here in Lucas County, we do know the struggles of getting people out to the polls and also the benefits of having a lot of organizations, churches, religious organizations, especially, that are encouraging people, their membership, to go out to the polls. So did Lucas County meet your expectations and get the job done on primary night?
Well, I tell you what, the men and women at the board, there were a few hiccups in Lucas and in other counties. One of them pertained to the iPads effectively that are used to check people in, having some technical errors. But the good news is we always have backup plans. This comes from my time in the military. You never want to have what we would single point of failure. You never want to have that could cause everything else to come unraveled. And so we require the boards of elections to have the old paper poll books, the alphabetical paper poll books that they can use to check people in if those iPads fail. We did have to default to those for the morning in Lucas County, but because they had that backup plan in place, voting continued. It may have taken a minute 30 to check people in versus the 45 seconds that it would take on the iPad.
There will have to be that second primary because the Ohio Redistricting Commission has been failing to get a set of maps together that everyone can agree to. So it's been a while, and it's been just a lengthy, I guess, headache producing process for a lot of people, voters, and those on the commission. So what cost will this be to taxpayers who are funding this?
Unfortunate that we have to have a second primary. This is something that everybody wanted to avoid. It's expensive to run elections in Ohio. People don't realize this, but really every time we have a statewide election, the price tag for that is somewhere between $20 and $30 million. So our estimate is that the additional cost for a second primary is going to be in that range. And commitment that I've made very loud and clear to our boards of elections is that there has always been a shared responsibility between the counties and the state when it comes to elections administration. And so I'm going to work to make sure that we get funding from the state legislature to help defray the cost to the counties so that they're not left bearing that cost alone.
For voters who are going to be out voting in this election, is there anything that they should know, expect, or is there anything that's going to be changing at the polls this time around?
We are working hard to recruit enough poll workers. That's the one thing that I'm really putting a lot of focus on to make sure that we're ready to staff. Think about that, 4,000 polling locations. It's almost 4,000 locations throughout the state that people are voting from 6:30 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. on election day. So we got to make sure that those are well staffed. Some of the boards of elections may use the authority that they have in law to slightly adjust the number of poll workers or the number of polling locations. Again, that's a bipartisan decision. Everything in elections is completely bipartisan. So many county boards of elections may look to slightly reduce the number of poll workers or consolidate some polling locations. If that happens, you'll get the same friendly service that you would always get. We work hard to avoid lines and make sure that that doesn't happen, but really nothing should change as it relates to this election.
There's no shortage of things happening in Columbus, and definitely at all those local boards of elections offices. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, thank you so much for your time.